Hi, I'm Claire.
Christy.
And Janine. We're three marketers that have spent decades in talent tech and recruitment, facing the same challenges and watching the same mistakes play out over and over again.
We started What's the Point because we're tired of the fluff, vanity marketing, and wasted budgets that never drive real growth.
This podcast is straight talk for marketers and leaders who want marketing that actually works. No jargon, no egos, just hard-won lessons and practical advice that will help you scale your business.
Sales and marketing. Sales versus marketing. Smarketing is even a phrase that I've heard coined. We have been talking about this for 20 plus years, that sales and marketing need to work more closely together and be more aligned. So in this episode, we've invited Paul Sharpe, co-founder of North Star People, Northern Rail hater, and all-round good guy, to discuss this with us, to talk about, are there ways in which we can fix it, to talk about the big problems that we see out there, and to discuss any insight that Paul can bring as to what brilliant businesses are doing to align the two much more closely together. So welcome, Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hello. Well, the answer to that is no.
Short episode.
There you go.
Shall we just stop there now?
Absolutely. That's done. Yeah, all done.
Let's start with the structure of recruitment agencies, Paul, because we know that they are so sales dominated. You know, a lot of agencies don't have a marketer, or they have a single marketer, a lonely marketer. So is that part of the problem here with the alignment?
I think the initial problem starts with the business leader. Okay. So, because as most business leaders have been recruiters, as a recruiter, you don't get trained in how to do marketing. You may work alongside marketing departments, but you don't get trained. No. It's a bit like cash flow. You don't get trained in cash flow. You know, 20 odd years in the industry, have I ever been trained in how to use marketing? No. Have I come across marketing people? Couple. Not any good ones, but sorry. So you just don't get trained in it. So the gap, the first gap for me starts at the leadership level. And it's really interesting because when business owners appoint or hire marketing people, they don't get it. So I really feel sorry for most people working for recruiters, because they join in an organisation, and in most cases, not all, but in most, the business owner doesn't get it. Okay. So, and I think this tracks back to part of the reason why when times are hard, marketing is one of the first things to go.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we know from our research, 68% of business leaders don't even track the return on investment from the marketing spend. Right. So, you know, if, you know, over 2/3 of people don't understand how to track return on investment from it, then, of course, when times are hard, it's going to be the first thing that goes, right? Because you just don't understand it. So I think it starts at the leadership level. From a structural perspective, you know, it's a very rough rule of thumb, depending upon, you know, sector structures, industries, perm, contract, all the rest of it. You know, once you get to 10 sales heads, that would normally trigger one other head. Okay. I won't use back office because you'll kill me. But
sorry, which century are we operating in?
But it would trigger one other head that wouldn't be a sales head. Okay. So it could be somebody doing compliance. It could be somebody doing marketing. It could be somebody doing, you know, podcasts. It could be anything. But that's a very rough rule of thumb in terms of ratio. But what frequently happens is just before you get to that point, somebody will appoint a operations person. Okay. And then the realization is that that person, you know, is maybe somebody who's fairly tech savvy or into the social media channels. And then there is often a belief that that individual could become a marketing person.
They can do marketing too.
They can do marketing too. They know how to post things on Instagram. And so they transition into that role, and then they end up doing ops and marketing, but they're not a marketing professional. And then what happens frequently is the business owner will then say, you need to go and get some marketing mentoring. And that sometimes happens. But here's one thought. In all my years in the industry, I've never actually known one leader get marketing mentoring. So I actually think, thinking this through, before the marketeer gets some mentoring, the business owner need some mentoring.
Touching on an episode.
I've actually delivered leadership training for a client. I mean, it was not in the original brief. It was as we were working with them, and they'd never had a strategic function, and we were serving as a complete outsourced function. Sorry, this sounds like an advert. It's not. But as we started going through, KPIs and ROI and all this, he was very, very open and honest and said, I actually don't know what good looks like. I don't know what to do. And there was a natural, probably very similar to what it would have been if I'd been an in-house marketer. There was a very natural progression that we actually had set calls. This is a couple of years ago, but we had these set calls, and I was teaching him marketing.
Yeah. I think even the language sometimes, right?
Yeah, and it's that we talked about it before, but knowing what you know, but owning what you don't know. And that whole kind of vulnerability from a leader to turn around and say, actually, you know what, I really do need to level up my insight knowledge, because if I'm going to be the best leader for this business, I need to know what all my levers could be. Yeah. And it may be that they don't necessarily pull them, there and then, but if they've got something in their back pocket that they know that they can rely on, a sort of a strategic approach to growth that isn't just about having more phone calls or, making sure the data in the CRM is up to date. Not that anybody ever says that ever, but wouldn't it be a wonderful world? But it's that knowledge of understanding what are my plays, what can I use in a strategic growth environment to gain traction in the marketplace. And I think marketing insight knowledge, absolutely fundamental. And that moment of what does great look like as well, because again, everybody can exist in this sort of moment in time where, I've heard that story, or I've had that example given to me, or I read somewhere in Harvard Business Review that, this amazing thing happened. Yeah. But I don't have 200K and I don't have, 6 marketeers at my disposal. But what can I do that can really move the needle for my business today?
Yeah. I think that the measuring the return on investment for me, I think, is really important. But it's got to be something you've got to believe in.
Yeah.
Because I have found myself in conversations with marketeers, clearly not you three, who have maybe claimed to bill £3 million a year, be one of the top contributors in terms of the sales pipeline, and I view myself as an operational marketeer, so I'm not a professional marketeer. But I then go digging around, the validity of that data and the validity of the claim. And I'll be honest with you, I think, where sometimes marketeers don't help themselves is grabbing older things and claiming they build all this money
by themselves.
And then suddenly the salespeople are going, that's bollocks. Yeah. That is absolutely wrong. And you shouldn't be going around saying that. Yeah. And so it causes friction then between those people that are, billing in a very measurable way and those people that are influencing but then claiming that it's been their activity. So that does wind me up.
And I totally get it too. But I, as a person who's been at the sort of delivery of all of these leads, no feedback given, one placement made, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of opportunity gone, but one deal. And that one deal gets so celebrated. And I'm like, but what about all the rest of the business that we left on the table? Yeah. Where's that level of... So structurally, again, I suppose this comes back to, like, where's the feedback loop? Where's the dynamic between the hunter-gatherers and the closers?
For me, that has to happen at the start. So before you start the campaign, before you start the demand gen process, what are we going to do with these leads? How are you as consultants going to know where these leads are coming from? How are you going to know what to do with them? How will I as the marketer know if they're quality leads or not? Having all of those conversations about the different stages of qualification, where are we marking those leads to be coming from? In the end, the ego bit of who
lands it,
it shouldn't matter, but it's about the upfront conversation of we all win if we get more rather than less. We all win if we convert more than one of these 40 that come in. But also we all win if we understand why those 39 weren't able to convert as well. So I think it starts ahead of the leads coming in the conversation about what are we trying to achieve, how are we measuring it, and what will we be all doing in this process? So that buy-in process is already there.
Yeah, what's each other's role?
And it's
I
a bit
think
more aligned.
Well, the other thing you have to remember, and I actually am siding with you versus that marketer or many marketers who've said this to you before, because at the end of the day, we're not e-commerce. We are not yet. Our industry is not at a place, as much as we can say that these marketing activities are attributing to the sale, but we're not at a place that you're taking a candidate and putting in a basket and putting your credit card details in. We're not e-commerce thing.
Yeah.
We'll never say never, but we're not e-commerce. There still is an interface, and the same goes true kind of to Claire's point, is that you can bring all the leads to market, and they actually could be amazing leads. Yeah. But if you don't have a closer who can actually do the deed, whether it's closing at, if you're doing contingency, or at job order stage, or doing a good recruitment process and getting the placement.
Yeah.
So we can't take claim to it. We can only say how we're attributing to it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Janine's point around almost purpose is really key, because I think, before you go down the marketing route or hire anybody, it's just like, what is the purpose? What's the problem? What are you trying to fix? Why? Yeah. And how do you know when you've got there? Yeah. And I think that for me is super important. So I always measured 3 things, rightly or wrongly. It's the first time I've declared this, by the way. So hopefully I've been measuring the right 3
It's
things.
an exclusive.
But I talk about the 3 C's. So you've got your candidates, your customers, and your colleagues. So you're smiling, so I'm assuming that's got a thumbs
I don't think
up
that's
of
new.
approval.
Same
So
one.
it's just,
Exactly what we all said, like literally about half an hour
I think
ago.
there's a 4th one catch.
So it's just, how does marketing help me build, branded communities? How do we engage? How do we get traffic to the website? How do we get them into the CRM? How do we understand we can tag and code them so we understand the source? And, if you know your average placement fee is 10 grand, then you do one of them a month, then that's 120 grand banged. So I get that. The sometimes the softer marketing activity at the beginning of the funnel is, I think, more fluid and harder to say that is as a direct result of that. But if you've driven traffic to your website into your CRM, or you're driving traffic through job ads or whatever, and that candidate is tagged in the right way, so there's a bit of process and technology bit issue here, then I always thought that was a really good measure of, a very measurable way of saying that's the value. Your inbound leads coming through your customers, again, lots of activity at the front end. It could be SEO, it could be, mail shots, it could be content, it could be a whole myriad of different things, but tracking them and how you pull them into the business. I'll come on to the conversion bit and the closing the leads, because I think that's a really great point as well. And then the last bit for me, which I think we sometimes forget, is, most recruiters are at some point going to hire 1 or 2 or 3 people this year. Marketing should be out there promoting the EVP, right? Absolutely. Because, I'm not saying, everybody hires themselves. Some people use rec-to-recs, but, they should, just like I would advise your organisation to do an element of direct sourcing, recruitment agents should be doing the same thing. So that EVP bit for me is really important. So I always want to know, who's engaged with us, what have we pushed out there. Every business leader should be meeting 1 or 2 people every month to pipeline talent. Now that number might vary depending upon the size of the organisation, but they should be meeting people on a regular basis. They shouldn't be just recruiting when they've got a need to fill a seat. They should always be looking out in the marketplace to meet people, want to find out what's going on out there. Secondly, to map the competition. But thirdly, more importantly, so that when they've got a need, they've got somebody who goes, I met Claire 3 months ago. Right, let's get on the phone to Claire. We've already built a bit of rapport. We've had a bit of engagement. Yeah,
I understand it.
We can move quicker. And I think what happens as a byproduct of all this is, because recruitment agency owners don't do that, then when they've got performance issues, they tend to stick with it and accept it because they're fearful of losing one individual. So you get this sort of, high support, low challenge, upper quadrant box up here, rather than the support and challenge being equal, because people are fearful. And they're fearful because they don't know where the next hire is going to come from. Yeah. And I think marketing's got a massive amount to play in promoting the EVP.
Yeah. Your perspective of colleagues, consultants, or colleagues mostly, but it's mainly consultants. than clients and candidates. And again, kind of growing up in the world that I did, it was, we went from a bear market to a bull market and whatever that means in between. I kind of figured out that I knew what that was in the moment. But at no point did anybody ever really turn around and say to me, we're going to put a campaign together to recruit.
Yeah.
So all the years that I was operating in an agency world, I worked for one of the big ones, sort of via a couple of smaller ones, but nobody ever asked me to build that campaign. And I wonder whether or not...
So I had that. I was asked, and actually the question I ask, hopefully many people watching this have heard me say this. If you have a pie and you're carving up your pie because you have 100% of time, you don't have 200, 1,000% of time, you have 100% of time, how do you carve it up between candidate acquisition, client acquisition, and colleague acquisition? And you can't say thirds. Because if you say thirds, you're spinning your wheels.
Oh, never.
There's always a driver. Yeah. There's always, and it can change. It can change. And it's definitely going to change by different type of recruitment business. So teaching, nursing, any laborers, it's always very candidate heavy. But it's interesting, if you rewind we're now coming on 3 years ago, when it was everybody was scrambling for internal talent. When I asked that question, you'd be surprised. You'd get a lot more, okay, right now we are 30 or maybe 50% internal consultant acquisition. At that period, it was like 40% client, 40% candidate, 10% client, because they were just drowning in jobs. They were like, we don't need any more jobs. But the point of that, of having that kind of, it's such a simple concept. It gets people thinking, okay, what actually do I need more of? Where can my marketers concentrate their time and focus? That is actually a very simple way of saying, where are we going to see value? Because the market shifts and the push pull.
But just let me ask this question: how many you're all on LinkedIn?
Yeah,
A little bit. How many agencies have you seen post content recently? I'll ask you, how many agencies have post content in the last week that you've seen and you've thought that looks like a really good agency to go and work for?
I've seen one, but
there's a few that I follow that I think are really good.
So 2, 1, none, couple.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that there's a kind of a misunderstanding of social channels, full stop. What's the purpose of them in a business sense? Because you do get the Ibiza pics and, here's our team incentive trip. And that's what people will say, well, that's our internal recruitment content.
That's our employer brand.
But also it's kind of confused with, that's just showy, Instagram-y kind of thing that I'm using on LinkedIn. There's a real confusion over that. And certainly it's not the business that I would want to go to. That is not.
I think
if they want to hire me, that's not
really
what I want.
Muddying the perception, and also as well, kind of increasing that wedge between sales, marketing, consultants, and business marketing and the capabilities. And it's almost like there's a reputation that just won't go away, and it continues to be the friction between the sort of reality. I wonder whether or not it's worth exploring a little bit more. You touched on it a little bit, Paul. The commercial awareness internally within an agency, and as an agency's growing, whether or not it's the first time round for a founder and they're starting out, or if they've been at this for a couple of years. I mean, quite a few people that we know that have been around, this has been their life. This is, them running their own recruitment agency is what they do. And, some great ones out there, some ones that keep going, and it's brilliant for them. They don't need to grow anymore. They don't want to go any further. But for those aspirational founders and leaders who are looking to really grow and scale their business, what's the baseline commercial reality that they need to know and understand?
Well, I think it goes back to that measuring the return on investment. So I'm going to bang on about that because I think that's a really imperative point to keep saying that. I think it comes back to the problem that you're trying to fix. I mentioned the customer bit. Customer's not just about customer acquisition; it's about customer retention as well. As an example, so if I was, so hindsight's never around when you need it, right? And if I had my time again, I'd do a trillion million things completely different to what I do it now. But one of the big aspects for me, outside of the candidate acquisition and driving colleague interest, is this customer bit. And because you can put a monetary figure on customers, because you know what the average customer spend is, or you should do. And I then go through the customer acquisition and the customer retention. So you put it into two pots. The starting point for me in any BD strategy is about it's about retaining. It's about that retention bit. It has to start there first. And we know that's really super important, because it's easy to sell to an existing customer than an old one. It's 5 times more expensive to acquire, all the sort of data points. We also know 27% of business leaders don't even measure customer retention. So that's a problem in itself, 27%. Wow. We know the average customer retention rate is 40%. So you can start to baseline and measure the business metrics of your business to understand where you've got overperformance, and therefore you don't need to do anything, just keep that going. Where you've got a few gaps, so sometimes there's a little tweak, and where you've got big gaps. So I think the commercial question that you answer for me comes back to understanding the key business metrics and where you are good and where you're not good. And I used to, when I was COO, I used to ring 3 or 4 business leaders up every quarter, and we'd share general trading information in a very informal way. But it would help me because the CEO might be celebrating that the business was 10% up year on year. And I would maybe say to the CEO, that's okay, but everybody else is trading 15% up. So actually, we're underperforming.
You're behind.
And I was always told never to go around saying those sort of stories because it was his, persona and demeanour and integrity and everything he was trying to sort of create about his own individual performance. But that was the reality. So to answer your question on the commercial bit, for me, unless you've benchmarked your business externally or you understand thoroughly your business metrics and where you are doing well and where you're not doing well, then you can't even plug marketing in, right? Because if you understand that your customer retention, as an example, is 30% and the industry average is 40%, then I'd be like, so how does marketing help me retain more customers? What are you going to do? And then you go through let's segment the customer base. So you segment it, you might end up with 3 different buckets. And it's like, that bucket up there is going to get the owner's intense attention. That owner's going to meet them every quarter. It's going to be, out there eating. And then you might say bucket B might get a manager, but then they get a shitload of marketing activity. And bucket C might go in, it's a transactional relationship. We're not too sure if we can get it from acceptance to trust or trust to advocacy or whatever. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to throw the marketing engine at it and try and drive some of those relationships up the customer loyalty chain so that we can drive spend, because we know that spend up here is typically higher and better than spend down there. And that, I think, is a really key point. It comes back, in summary, to the business, understanding your business metrics and the financial gaps.
Let me ask this then, Justin. I think we can all agree with that, right? We're all seasoned, let's call it.
Old.
Old.
Talk for yourself.
What about the junior marketers? The typical model here for smaller recruitment businesses is that they've got junior marketers. They probably don't know even maybe the average fee, let alone the customer retention rate. How do they move that dial? How do they start to have those conversations, Paul?
So this comes back to the business owner. I feel so strongly that
it's not happening.
But they're never going to get it unless they get some outside mentoring from a marketing expert. And even when they get that, if I'm being brutally honest with you, they'll get some good mentoring, and then they'll go back to the business owner and say, "Oh, well, we need to do this. We need to, look at the strategy and top down." And the leader will just like, yeah. And they'll glaze over and they'll go, yeah. Anyway, can you get on the phone to that candidate? I've got an interview to sort. He's got to come from the top down. Otherwise, I'll be honest with you, I fear that marketing person's role is time limited, and at some point they'll go, you know what?
I'm not making a difference.
I'm out of here.
We already have a framework for that as well. It's almost like, bash your head 3 times, and if you don't get someone bringing you back from the wall after the third one, then you probably should just go for the door. I think also as well, that whole ability to have that conversation. You talked about segmentation beautifully. It did make my heart sing a little bit. In the way in which you can do the segmentation view and break down, those that do, those that don't, those that we want to address. Really easy. But you can do that across all three of your sectors. So whether that's your colleagues and that you want to attract to the business, or whether it's candidates or it's clients.
Yes.
So you should be, as a marketeer, always thinking in terms of cohorts, segments, and control. And I think having that control to spin up a campaign, communicate, and get the data and know where you're going, that in itself is the commercial awareness that I would expect every junior marketeer to come to, or at least get to quite quickly, especially in an organisation where the commercial realities aren't raining from the top down. Because again, you've got that duty of care to find the direction of travel and to make that impact. And you can only do that if you've got a purpose and a sense of direction. But again, it's not helped, because we've got this issue where consultants get rewarded financially. Marketeers get a flat salary, usually one of the lowest in an organisation.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that. So the marketing team that I had were based on SMART objectives, and the marketing manager, head of marketing, was based around some of the measures which you talked about, which are around candidates place and customer leads that came in. The bit that he did exceptionally well, and you touched upon this earlier, is he tracked everything.
Yeah.
So if he passed leads over, because he was directly incentivized on the conversion of those leads, not generating, the conversion.
Yeah.
Honestly, he was like a rat of a draper. He was on it like that. And so you do need an element of, I'm not saying you need a salesperson in marketing, but you need somebody who's a bit like, I ain't going to let that go because that's worth like 500 quid.
Yeah.
You want somebody who's equally hungry, but hungry in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And
In the same way that the salesperson wants to place it right in order to
100%.
get their bonus.
Yeah.
Like, that's how they
It's the
operate.
same.
You need the same
Yeah.
mentality.
But he followed everything through, and if and if someone didn't get picked up, he'd be trying to deal with it, and then he'd escalate it straight away. It's like I've given you these roles, and nobody's followed up.
Yeah.
I've gone in the CRM and I've seen nobody's contacted the customer, or
Yeah.
honestly, he was really, really on it. So I think if you can end up in a place, but you've got to create the right environment, the right culture, right, so that you
But
can
that wasn't
encourage that.
standoutish, or it wasn't against the grain, kind of.
Yeah.
You don't want someone just constantly going, you haven't done that yet.
No.
Can you get on that now?
Yeah.
Because again, they're not doing their job, but at the same time, they're kind of involved in the whole program, and they're not just there to kind of throw stuff over the wall.
Yeah.
I heard about this business once, a very household name business, that if the actual placement was made that it had a marketing touch point, the consultant's commission was lower. And a percentage of that was then put into a pot for the marketing budget, not for the marketer bonus, for the marketing budget. And if you think about what a horrible culture that would, and I don't have a deep knowledge of the culture, but this is my own interpretation, but you're breeding distrust. You're breeding consultants who won't say that marketing contributed. You literally are breeding the silos.
And won't work the leads because they would rather work their own, right?
Exactly.
They get more bonus on their own.
Exactly. Or they hide it. They hide it that the leads didn't come from that. And
I've seen that.
We talk about, the lonely marketers, oftentimes it's made lonelier because you actually are, considered separate, know?
That's stupid. To be really honest with you. I just can't think why anybody would even do that.
I mean, what kind of...
It's just like, I've no words. What's the point?
That's equally how we feel about it.
Right, let's turn to something a bit more positive. What do you see out there as opportunities? How can we help fix this? How can marketers step up to fix it? How can leaders look at something differently?
I think so. I've talked about the business metrics and the business data. I've talked about this issue around customer retention, and the two other big ones for me is innovation. So we're talking a lot at the moment around productivity and efficiency, and we have this challenge in the industry around how many roles we actually work versus fill.
Yes.
So the industry average is 30%. We know that from our data. So for every 10 roles you work, you fill and get paid for 3.
Yeah.
But then there's 7 that you don't. So there's a lot of waste in the business. So having working on good roles and getting good leads is a really important. I think it's a massive challenge for the business. So I guess one of the questions I've got is just how does marketing make sure that stuff comes in that is good leads rather than just noise? Because actually, what agencies need at this moment in time is less noise and more good leads. But the second bit, the reason for sharing that is the amount of business leaders that have sat down with their customers in the last 2 years and innovated is less than 15%. Now, I actually think marketing has got a massive part to play in this, and I'll share what I used to do. So the marketing team, so we had a standard marketing slide deck, and it would get updated every 6 months. And the marketing team would pull together thought leadership, market insights, we'd scrape information from staffing industry analysts, Gartner, CIPD, REC, ABSCO, whatever. We'd pull together this incredible slide deck, and the marketing team would literally push me out the door to go and present the slide deck to customers.
Okay.
Now, if you think about this, the one thing we struggle to get is face-to-face time with customers, because customers don't value, sitting with a recruiter for an hour and a half, because they think, they're like, go on, ask me if I've got any vacancies.
And I've got 8 others.
So it's hard to get time. So I flipped it the other way around and said, right, I do 10, 15%, 20% max looking back, and the rest of it would all be looking forward. I would look to my marketing department to give me all the information I needed in a nice presentable deck. I'd have to go away and read it inside out, and so I had to really know my shit inside out. But the data points got to a point where I actually didn't need to even look at slides, because I just knew the data off the top of my head.
Okay.
From a professional perspective, it makes me come across really knowledgeable.
Yeah.
But you are
even more
Makes me
knowledgeable.
look knowledgeable.
And the customers loved it, because I was sharing sometimes competitor intel, but more around thought leadership. What was happening in the world of work? What was happening to the workforce? Things they needed to plan for, things they needed to action.
You're basically answering their unspoken pains and challenges.
Things that were going to happen to their workforce, skills that they needed to hire for the future, because we knew their business so well. We'd done all the research and all that sort of stuff. But I would frequently then get asked in by the HR director to come in and speak to the HR business partners, as an example.
Yeah.
Or I was invited to HR forums. So my customers were mainly HR people, as you probably gather. But that data became so important that I then pushed it out down to the MDs, and the MDs would go out and present it.
Yeah.
So it just means that we've been talking about consultative selling for 20 odd years.
That's the
Nothing's
same
changed.
misalignment, isn't it?
So this was all about trying to shift it a bit, so that when you sit in front of a customer, you have a conversation about something which they value, rather than something that you're trying to get out of it. And that was an absolute game changer. But all the work, the heavy lifting, came from the marketing department.
It's interesting, because you just sparked a long lost memory of many, many years gone by. We used to create a thought leadership report, and of the assets you'd create to support it, one was always a presentation deck. And sometimes it was a presentation deck, depending on the subject, to go to a university for a talk or a trade body or something. But exactly the story you just said. And what I've been sitting here thinking is, when did that change? And it changed the moment, because if I actually think back to salary guides, and you'd print the guide, and they'd go in, and you'd have a website, so they had a form, they download it, but they wouldn't get the guide because you want the leads, and then they'd go with the guide, and they have their presentation, and they deliver it. But there's been a lot of changes since then. The instant gratification, you expect the guide right away. Even the phone call, the consultant outbound client call has evolved. Do you think it's partly, it's such a, it's a tried and true method, what you just say. But do you think it's possibly changed today, because we just don't, the market has changed, the opportunities to give that have changed?
I think salary surveys are that much of a deck that could be that big.
Well, I'm talking about thought leadership more widely.
The thing with salary surveys, you can get a lot of that information online now straight away. So it's got to be something which the customer hasn't got, can't get, or they're going to really value.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for salary surveys. I'm talking about much more strategic up here. I'm talking about thought leadership, advising on the world of work, how the workforce is going to change, how the gig economy is going to see. We're going to see the demise of the permanent worker because of the rise of the gig worker.
What I'm saying though is it's not. I'm with you on the thought leadership and the different subject matters. But what I'm saying is the actual way you can deliver it. You're not getting those in-person meetings like you used to. You're not. Or are they? So much is happening on the phone or on the online. Can consultants watching this right now actually have the opportunity to get into a business and have those kind of discussions?
The consultants, no.
Can a marketer drive a meeting?
And in sometimes the business leader, no. This comes down to how you position it, what you're trying to get out. If you got the right relationship first and foremost, because if I ring up a direct business owner now and I haven't got a relationship, then I'm at the contact stage, right? I mean, I could be an absolute arsehole. Some people probably think I am, but it's just how do you build upon that? And how do you get to that trusted bit? And every agency's got some customers in that loyalty and advocacy box and trust. If they haven't, they should be shutting the doors, by the way. But that's your starting point, right? This isn't, but you wouldn't sit with every customer and do this because it's time intensive.
The hook as well is that you leverage those 10 dozen people to say, actually, we've got this thought leadership piece. We'd love for you to comment on it. We'd love for you to tell us how this validates, is this valid in terms of what we're seeing? But let's put your name in it as well. And then wouldn't it be brilliant?
And round tables off the back of them are still brilliant. They're still brilliant.
One of the world's biggest RPO providers, part of their pitch, because I've been client side receiving the pitch in the last 2 years, one of their biggest pitches were, at the very end, and if you come into the family, then you're automatically a platinum customer and you get access to Josh Burton, who's a big thought leader in the world of HR work. And so it's suddenly like, there's a bit of exclusivity here. But the same provider had a existing business relationship with a customer, I won't mention them, and I met the HR director and she was open to change. And I asked her some of the questions, why are you open to change? Why are we talking? I'd been sponsored in there, by the way, as a referral, so that's how I'd got in there. But one of the things she said to me was, I'm not getting anything from the provider. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, I'm one of the biggest customers. I haven't met the CEO in 3 years. Nobody's come and shared any insights. Nobody's telling me what I should be doing, what I need to do better. I'm just getting nothing. It's just a transactional relationship.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, and you'd be shocked if I told you...
And this is RPO. I mean, the knots on the figure of their annual spend would be
huge,
eye-watering.
Huge.
Yeah. But the energy of, I think, in practice marketing, they're going after... So again, when you get to stages like that, you're either directed to go and get the more. Yeah. But you're not focused on the what have we got?
No.
What have we got and who have we got and what are we offering? Where's the value exchange of that relationship that's existing that they're trusting us with and we're not delivering and we're not expanding on that? Not just in a share of wallet, but actually in a value delivery.
Claire, 38% of business owners have not sat down with the customers in the last 12 months and had a proper service review. Now, I hate the word service review because it's then me turning up and presenting a load of data on me. This is about sitting down and having a proper conversation, which is what you've just articulated there. But 38%, and I'm not talking about the top 10, I'm just saying the top 3. They haven't done it.
It makes it massively inauthentic as well because those service providers will have promised a review, will have promised an update, will have promised a meeting with the CEO or the Josh Burton.
But again, you were absolutely right in the beginning. The retention part has got to be the biggest part of your marketing view, like your lens in terms of an existing business. And it's one of the first things that I look at. It's like, okay, so what's your current turnover? Who are those clients? Who can I champion
Yeah.
within them? What relationships do we have? How many more relationships can we gain from that? How much more sticky can we be? And where can we give the support? So I use you've heard me bang on about this, the strategizer value map model. So you do the square and you do the circle, and the clients do a circle.
Yeah.
You carve that up into their pains, the jobs that they do day to day. So whether they're HRD or even if they're a hiring director and they're head of IT, whatever. What are their day to day jobs? What do they have to do? If you know what they do, you know your market. But then you'll also know what are their pains, what's keeping them up at night, what's their challenges. And then you'll also know what do they need in order to get through those challenges. There's your language. There's your marketplace mapped. There's your priorities in terms of their top 3 pains. They feel this, they can't do that, and they can't move forward with this because they don't have this, that, and the other. You go and answer that in your thought leadership, or you say to them, we've done this bit of research. What do you think about it? You get their approval. And oh my goodness, that is literally the gift that keeps on going.
Well, also you have to keep asking them, don't you? Because those 3 pains today won't be the same
different
pains
next
in 12
month.
months' time.
Yeah, well, you want it to be different because otherwise they're not great at their job.
and for me, that's where I think marketing's got a big part to play, because if you've got the right marketing support team, people, skills, whatever in your team, then I'd be pushing you out the door, going, right, I'm going to give you reason to go and reach out to those top 3 customers. And my expectation, Claire, is you're going to do it every 6 months, and this is what I'm going to give you.
Absolutely.
And then, the next layer down gets them a bit more diluted, and it might be, 1 to a few, but then the last one is 1 to many. That's where marketing has got a really key part to play. But I'll just, one little quick story. Miles and I worked with a recruiter in Ireland not too long ago, and we went through all this because they were trying to shift services into the RPO space. And they were struggling to get in front of customers, so we went through a similar story. And they had so much data, they just not pulled it all together. So all they had to do was just pull it together. And we got a message out of the blue from one of the leaders. Rather than getting 1 in 10 meetings, he was suddenly getting 8 in 10 meetings because he positioned it in a slightly different way. And this is all about giving. It's about building that relationship to truly shift the dial away from being an order taker to somebody who's truly solving problems. That for me is gold dust if you can do that as a recruiter.
Paul, we have to ask you, what's the point?
I think the point is the market is hard, as we all know.
It is.
If you try and do what you've done in the first half of this year, in the second half, then I can tell you now, you're just going to get the same results. Most agency owners are struggling. It's there's stress out there, there's anxiety, there's a lot of worry. People have got to adapt, and this waste in the business is a big problem. We've got to start looking at the services that our customers want, the problems that we're trying to solve, and we've got to shift. Not in all cases. I'm not saying there isn't a space for contingent recruitment, but people are crying out for something different. It doesn't have to be RPO. It can be, more retained work. It could be subscription. It could be embedded. It could be, project based. There's lots of different things out there. But I know, because I've worked with a solo entrepreneur, and he's booked 40% of his business this year by changing his business model and his services. And he's a solo entrepreneur, not a million miles from here. And we equally know in the middle, we've got recruiters now blocking out the competition. They're getting recurring revenue. They're able to manage the cash flow better. I wouldn't say the marketing's totally aligned, but it's getting there because it's a shift and a change. And then at the big end of the spectrum, we've got some bigger agencies that have shifted the whole spectrum and gone full on RPO. Whatever you do in your business, when you're developing new services, you go immediately to your own relationships and your network. I've definitely done that. But what I found is that in my learning, you quickly exhaust your own relationships and network, and then you sort of scratching around going, where's the next bit? And that for me is where marketing has got to play, because you will go through where you've got warm leads and you can pick the phone up and people will answer it, but you'll quickly run out. You've got to have a pipeline coming through. And that for me is a key point of marketing.